Université Paris-Dauphine, and she will speak about random trees constructed by aggregation.
Okay, so thank you for the introduction and thanks to the organizer for the invitation. So I'm going to talk about work done jointly with Nicolas Curien on random trees constructed by aggregation. So this construction is directly inspired by the well-known line-breaking construction by Aldous of the continuum random tree, and it's a generalization. So let's start directly with the model, and then I will discuss our goal and motivation. So I start with sequence A of strictly positive term, and from this sequence I will build recursively a sequence of growing trees as follows. So the construction is very simple. I hope that everybody can see me. So I start with a tree T1, which is simply a closed segment of length A1, the first term of my sequence. Okay? And for mostly a practical reason, I will root my tree, so I decide to take one of the two extremities of this segment as the root. Okay? Now I take uniformly at random a point on this segment. Let's say I've selected this point, and I branch a new segment on the selected point, and this new segment has length A2, the second term of my sequence. There's no notion of order in my construction. I see the tree as a metric space, okay? And so this is my tree now T2. And I continue the process. I now select a point uniformly at random on the whole tree T2. So my selected point can be either there or there. Let's say I've selected this one, and I branch a new segment with length A3. And so on. Okay, so it's clear after n step I have a tree that I call Tn. Of course, these trees are growing as n grows, and the main object of my talk will be the limiting tree, which is obtained as the completion of the union of the Tn. Okay. So just two remarks on the completion procedure. I keep the tree structure while completing, in the sense that I still have a connected object with no loop, and the point that may appear by completion are necessarily leaves of the tree. A leaf of a real tree is a point such that if you remove it from the tree, you're still connected. So is this clear? Because all my talk will be about this object T, and my main goal will be to see how the initial sequence A influence the geometric properties of the limiting tree. And I will essentially focus on two properties. First, try to see how A influence the bondedness or compactness of the tree, and second, we will focus, try to calculate the Hausdorff dimension of the tree as a function of A. And for those two properties, it's reasonable to restrict ourselves to bounded sequence A. So from now on, sequence A is bounded. So as I said in introduction, our initial motivation comes from the line-breaking construction of the Brownian CRT, which was the first construction proposed by Aldous of the CRT, and which is that kind of construction for a particular sequence A. So I recall this construction. We start with an inhomogeneous Poisson process of intensity TdT on the half line. Okay, so we have some point R1, R2, 0 is R0, etc. Okay, the more we are on the left, the more the points are in mean close. And we will take as length the length of the interval between those points. So this is A1, A2, A3, etc. And then, so this is a random sequence, and given this sequence, we perform our construction and get a tree T, which is a version of the well-known Brownian continuum random tree. So using this construction, Aldous proved that the Brownian tree is almost surely compact and has Hausdorff dimension too. And actually, the starting point of our work was a question raised by Frédéric Paulin, who is a French geometer, and who wanted to know how Aldous' theorem gets transformed when we change the intensity in the inhomogeneous Poisson process and replace it by intensity t to the power beta dt for some strictly positive beta. Okay, so other motivation comes from the fact that there are other natural models of random trees that can be constructed by such aggregation procedure. Here I give two examples. The stable Lévy tree introduced by Le Gall, Lejean, and Duquesne can be constructed by such procedure. Christina will give a talk on this topic this afternoon. And another model, which is called the alpha model of Ford, can also be constructed like this. But in these two examples, I must say that the gluing procedure is more complex than my uniform gluing, because there, well, you have to take a more complex measure on the pre-existing tree to add your new branch. Okay, and so last, well, this gives a new model of randomly growing structures that joins a long list of well-known models and share some properties with some of them. Okay, so let's turn to simulation. So these simulations were done by my PhD student Camille Pernia, who's here. And so he simulates 4 examples of trees. In the 3 first example, the sequence A is random and given by a Poisson, homogeneous Poisson process with different intensity. So here we recover the Brownian tree. Okay, and in the last example, we just take the constant sequence A equal to 1. Okay. So what we can see on this simulation is that here, when the sequence goes quite fast to 0, we have something which is more flat than when the sequence is going less fast to 0. But we can't guess on the simulation which of these 3 will be bounded or not, for example. So we did also this graph on the that represents the maximal height of the tree, okay, which is the maximal distance of a vertex in the tree to the root. And so we can guess from, for example, in the 2 first case, that the tree should be bounded in the limit. Of course, we already know it's the case for the Brownian CRT. In this case, it's less clear. And it's in the case where all the branches have length 1, clearly the height diverges. And actually, well, the good scaling is in log n. And, well, of course, this is not a demonstration, but we can check it rigorously that it converges in log n. Okay, so let's turn to the main statement. So I have my sequence A, the tree constructed from A, and an important quantity in the statement will be this large I, which is simply the sum of the first I terms of the sequence. And I will split the presentation of my results in two main parts. First case, when the sum of the AI, small II, diverges, and second case, when it's finite. So let's turn to the first case. So the sum of the II diverges. So more precisely, I assume that the term II is bounded from above by I to the power minus alpha for some strictly positive alpha smaller than 1, plus possibly a negligible term. And I also ask that the partial sum large AI is exactly I to the power 1 minus alpha plus possibly a negligible term. So in this case, we can check that with probability 1, the tree will be compact, and that its Hausdorff dimension is given by 1 over alpha. So first example of application, well, clearly the power sequence I to the power minus alpha satisfies the assumption. Second example, which is the one corresponding to the question of Frédéric Paulin. We take a Poisson process with intensity T to the power beta with beta strictly positive and take the length of the interval. Then it's easy to check that the sequence will satisfy these two assumptions for alpha equal beta over beta plus 1. Okay? And so we deduce from this result that T is compact and has Hausdorff dimension 1 plus 1 over beta. And in particular, when beta equal 1, we recover the Brownian CRT. Okay, no, it does not. I'm sure you. No, I just tried to split the result in two pieces, but you're right. When alpha equal to 1, the sum is not necessarily divergent, okay. But the result still holds. Okay, that's like really the threshold point. I just want to insist on one point, is that in this case, the sequence AI is really just smaller than I to the power minus alpha. Okay, it's not equal to such quantity. There is a subsequence of term which is strictly much smaller than I to the power minus alpha. Okay, so this is really the condition we needed. And just to complete this statement, let's say that actually the compactness and the upper bound hold as soon as we have the upper bound on the term AI. Okay, we don't need the second condition there. And on the other side, the lower bound holds as soon as the partial sum are large enough. And I also need some conditions that will ensure that I won't have all the leaves that goes to infinity. Well, not very precise. I will precise this a little bit later. Okay, so that's the divergence K plus possibly alpha equal 1 and convergent case. And let's now turn to the case where the sum of the AI is finite. Okay, so of course in this case, a priori it looks less interesting because it's clear that the whole tree has a finite length, so it's bounded and it's easy to see that it is even compact. And actually it's also easy to see, we see here a simulation, it's very flat, that its Hausdorff dimension is 1. Okay. So the interesting quantity to look at actually, it's not the Hausdorff dimension of the whole tree. So here I just show that the trees, well, obviously you can decompose it between the set of leaves of the trees and the other part, which is usually called the skeleton of the trees. This skeleton has necessarily a Hausdorff dimension equal to 1 because it's just a countable union of segments. And so the dimension of the tree is actually the maximum of the dimension of the leaves of the tree and of 1. Okay. And in this case, where the Hausdorff dimension will be equal to 1 in all cases, the interesting quantity to look at is actually the Hausdorff dimension of the set of leaves, which can be much smaller and can be computed. Or at least we have some information on it. So first result, so we assume that the sum is finite, okay, so the other dimension is 1. And more precisely, if we know that the sum of the term to the power gamma for some gamma smaller than 1, then we can check that the Hausdorff dimension of the leaves is smaller than gamma. And this result is actually completely independent on the way we glue the branch on the pre-existing tree. There we do not use to prove it the uniform selection of the gluing point. Okay. It's true of whatever you do. But now if you want to have something more precise and an exact result for the dimension of the leaves, well, of course we have to do more precise result, and I go back to the uniform gluing of the branch, and there the counterpart of the previous theorem in the convergence case is the following. So now we take alpha strictly larger than 1 and still assume that the generic term of the sequence is bounded by I to the power minus alpha plus a negligible term. And we also have to ask that the sequence does not go too fast to 0, and our assumption writes as follows. We ask that the sum of the term between the i's term and the 2i's term is of this order, okay? And then we can prove that the Hausdorff dimension of the set of leaves is 1 over alpha. Okay, and there I just put a corollary that mix the two main theorems in the particular case where we have a power sequence I, and then the Hausdorff dimension of the set of leaves is in each case 1 over alpha. Okay, so I will in a few slides try to give you the main step of the proof of this theorem. Before that, I want to complete this and discuss a little bit more the notion of compactness and boundedness. Until now, we have just seen one condition, sufficient condition for compactness. If the sequence is bounded from above by a power decreasing sequence, we know that our tree is compact. Okay, so it's still an open question to find explicitly sufficient and necessary condition on the sequence I to have boundedness. However, there are several things that we can say to complete this. And first thing is that we can check that in this setting, compact is equivalent to bounded. So of course we always have compactness implies boundedness, but here in this aggregation process, the two properties are equivalent. And clearly, since this property only depends on the asymptotic of our process, we will have a 0-1 law, and this property will hold with probability 0 or 1. Okay. So then I just sum up some results we have on compactness and boundedness. So the first one is the one we already discussed, sufficient condition for compactness, and there I put a necessary condition. So the first one is completely obvious in view once we have this result. Okay, if your sequence does not converge to 0, so if you have an infinite number of terms that are bounded from below, of course your tree cannot be compact, and so cannot be bounded. Okay, so actually in our proof we first checked it and then that. And the second condition, which is necessary for boundedness, may be more surprising at first glance, but actually this series there, we will see this in the two next slides, appear very naturally in our construction. It's related to the typical height of a point in our tree. Okay, so let's just complete this by saying that if we take the contrary of this assertion, none of them are sufficient for compactness or boundedness. For example, here, example 1, we have an example of sequence that decrease to 0, but the sum is infinite, so the tree cannot be compact. And second example, here I have a sequence that does not go to 0, but the sum is finite, so the tree cannot be bounded either. Okay. This being said, the same day as the day we put our paper on arXiv, Amini, De Broglie, Griffiths, and Olver put this result also on the arXiv. In the case where the sequence A is monotone, so in this case they have a necessary and sufficient condition for boundedness, which is simply that this sum here is finite. Okay, and so with the previous result, you also know that we have compactness in this case. So typically, the threshold will be for that kind of sequence. Okay, when beta here is larger strictly than 1, the series converge, so the tree is bounded, and for beta smaller and equal to 1, the series diverges, and so the tree is not bounded. Okay, and with our result on the Hausdorff dimension, we know that so when the tree here is bounded, its Hausdorff dimension is infinite. Let's just add the two remarks. First, to say that this condition cannot be sufficient for boundedness in the general case. So it's easy to. It's the same counterexample as before. I have here a sequence that does not go to 0, so the tree cannot be bounded, but still this sequence satisfies this condition. And more generally, we can even find a sequence that goes to 0, but such that the tree is not bounded, and still this is satisfied. And other remark, for us it was important to really look at this question in a general setting, because our starting question with the Poisson, with the length given by the Poisson process, are typically non-monotone. Okay. Okay, so now let's turn to the height of a typical vertex. So this question is interesting in itself, and also will be for us an important tool to prove some of the results I mentioned before. So what do I mean by typical vertex? So I have my tree Tn, and the theory T, and Tn are subtrees of T. Okay, and on each Tn, I will put the uniform measure, which is a normalized length measure. Okay, so as to have a probability measure. And given my limiting tree T, I pick uniformly at random a point according to mu_n, and I want to know how this typical vertex behaves when n goes to infinity. Okay, say differently, I want to know how the measure mu_n behave when n goes to infinity. And here we got the following result. With probability 1, the typical vertex converge in distribution if and only if the sequence, the sum here, is finite. Okay, so that's where the previous result on the necessary condition for boundedness come from, because when this sum is infinite, it's written here, we can check that the distance between the typical vertex and the root goes to infinity, and so the tree cannot be bounded. Okay. And so when this sum is finite, we have convergence of the typical vertex to the limiting point, and we can check that when the total sum of the initial sequence I is infinite, then necessarily this limiting distribution will be supported by the leaves of the tree. Okay, the mass is pushed to the leaves. That's what happened, for example, for the Brownian CRT. Whereas when the sum is finite, the limiting distribution is simply the normalized length on the limiting tree. And again, my favorite example to show that it's possible, of course, that the typical vertex converge, but that the whole tree is not bounded. Okay, so now I'm going to explain the main lines of the proof of this result. And to do this, we will do a coupling in our construction of the tree Tn. I want to build it simultaneously as a typical vertex. So my goal, to be a little bit more precise, is to build this coupling procedure so that for each n given Tn, xn is uniform on Tn, and moreover, I want the distance between the root and xn to increase. So let's do, so the starting point is easy. I have my tree T1, and I simply take x1 uniformly at random on T1, and now explain the recursive construction with this drawing. So say that we have reached stage n-1, we have our tree Tn-1 and typical vertex x n-1, and then I will choose two different procedures with two probabilities. So with probability large an-1 over an, I decide to branch my new segment on a point here that I have taken uniformly at random independently of x n-1, and so I put my new branch there, and I decide that xn is equal to x minus 1. With a complementary probability, I decide to branch my new segment on my typical vertex x minus 1 and to take the vertex xn in the new branch uniformly. Okay? So finally, in both cases, I branch my new segment on a new uniform point. Okay? So I still have a realization of Tn. And with this probability, xn is uniform in Tn minus 1, and with a complementary probability, it's uniform in the segment of length an. So at the end, it's indeed uniform in the whole tree Tn. And clearly, the distance between xn and the root is increasing because either it's equal to the previous distance or we add small pieces here. And note that the size of the small pieces that we add is an times the uniform distribution on 0, 1. So there is a small subtlety here, which is that xn is not distributed as yn given the whole tree, because in this construction, xn will be a branch point of the final tree T. Okay, so I cannot have taken it uniformly on Tn minus 1, but still it's not so close, so far. Sorry, not so far from what we want to do. So let's just focus on this coupling procedure and rewrite things. If I look now at the distance between xn and the root, I can write it as a sum of that kind of term with at each step with a probability ai over large ai, I add a new length ai times the uniform distribution on 0, 1. Okay. And so we just want to know if this series converge, and for this we use the 3 series theorem that tells us that since our sequence is bounded, it's equivalent to have the convergence of this series there and the convergence of its expectation. And so we just have to compute the expectation with this series there. And more precisely, we have a convergence of the whole sequence xn because, well, we can write the distance between 2 points xn and xm like this, okay? So if the series converge, this sum converge, so we have a Cauchy sequence, and since my tree is complete, it's converging, okay? And conversely, if the series diverges, the distance tends to infinity, so it does not converge. Okay. So I have proved a version of our theorem for the T-typical vertex, but for the xn version and not the yn version. So to conclude for the yn version, I won't go too much in detail, but as I said, it's not an immediate consequence of the xn version because the y and x do not have the same distribution. But still, we can use the x procedures to prove that the sequence yn is tight, okay, under this condition. And once we have tightness, it's sufficient to check that all possible limits in distribution are the same. Okay? And this is done by a martingale argument. So it's a very easy martingale that appear in our process. I don't know if you can see the red part there. So I fix an integer I, and Ti being built, I take a set, Borel set, a large A, so it's in red there on my picture. And then I continue my processes, and I will color in red all the descendants of A. Okay? So you have this part and this part. And this part is black there because this was already there in TA, so its descendant, its descendant is black. Okay. And now if I look at the length, total normalized length of the red part, I have a martingale. It's a half line of check. And it's a martingale which of course is between 0 and 1, so it's bounded, so it converges. And the limit is really the good candidate for the unique limiting distribution. Okay. But just notice that this martingale argument is, does not depend on any assumption on I, it's always true. And to check that we have indeed convergence, we have to check the tightness to be sure that the mass does not go far away. Let me just say, I mean, we use this argument to have other results. Formulating the things a little bit differently, I can say that here I have a two-urn scheme, okay, where I have the red urn and the black urn. Each time, the weight of a urn is just its total length, and each time I select a urn with a probability proportional to its weight, I put the new segment in this urn, and so on. And with this interpretation, we can use a result by Pimentel on generalized Polias urn that says that if initially our set A has a mass which is strictly between 0 and 1, and since the sequence A is bounded, then we know that the limit will also be non-trivial. Okay? And using this, which means that for large n this quantity is necessarily strictly positive, we can check using a Borel-Cantelli type argument that once, for example, that when you have a sequence that does not go to 0, you will have a subsequence of term that will be branched in its descendant, and you have an infinite line that will appear in your tree, and your tree cannot be bounded. Okay, and we use a more subtle version of this to prove the equivalence between compactness and boundedness. And just to finish this proof, the limit in distribution of yn is the same as the one for xn. It's easy to check. They have the same projection property. And using this and the construction of x1, it's easy to see that the limit is supported by the leaves when the sum is infinite, and by the whole tree when the sum is, by the whole tree when the sum is finite. Okay. So I let you breathe 2 minutes because I'm continuing with proof. So now I want to give an idea of the proof of the two main results I mentioned. And well, I just first recall the definition of Hausdorff dimension. Okay, so here you have the definition for each strictly positive R of the R-dimensional Hausdorff measure. Okay, and well, you all know, well, this quantity is decreasing with R. It's infinite for a while. Then it will reach 0. Okay, we do not know exactly what happened at the joint point, but it can be infinite, 0, or in between, but this jump point is the Hausdorff dimension of the set we consider. Okay? So with this definition, we see that when you want to give an upper bound of the Hausdorff dimension for your set, it's sufficient to find a nice covering, such that with this specific covering, you're able to check that for large enough R, you have a 0 higher dimensional Hausdorff measure, and this will imply that your Hausdorff dimension is smaller than the R for which it is 0. Okay, so that's what we will do for our two results. So I have just recalled this result on the upper bound of the Hausdorff dimension in the two cases, infinite sum and finite sum. And I will start by giving an idea of the proof of the second one, which is, I think, a little bit easier to prove. Okay, so I assume that for some gamma strictly smaller than 1, my sum of terms to the power gamma is finite, and I want to check that the Hausdorff dimension of the leaves is smaller than gamma. Okay. To do this, I fix an epsilon strictly positive, and I take an integer n epsilon such that the rest of the sum is smaller than epsilon. And then I decompose my tree in two pieces. The tree Tn epsilon, which is in black on my picture, and the rest of the tree, which you can see as a group of subtrees that are glued on the black structure. Okay. And well, what I call pink roots is the root of this subtree. Okay. And these subtrees give me a covering of most of the leaves I have in my tree. In my construction, actually, I have two types of leaves. The one that appear by completion, which is the set of leaves I am interested in, which is quite large, and just other leaves, which are the extremity of the segment that I glue at each step. But this set of leaves is countable, so its Hausdorff dimension is 0. So, I mean, it's not important to us. And here I have given a covering of the leaves appearing by completion. Okay. And now the argument is quite simple. So for each of these subtree, I notice that its height is necessarily smaller than the sum of the length of the segment used to build it. Okay. And this sum is smaller than epsilon because I is larger than I epsilon. Okay, so each of these trees have a height smaller than epsilon. So I have my covering of with a height smaller than epsilon, and then I compute the sum of this height to the power gamma, the same gamma as here. Okay, since gamma is smaller than 1, this height to the power gamma is smaller than this sum of ai to the power gamma. Okay, and since I mean I don't have two segments that are in two different trees, of course. This sum is smaller than the whole sum of AA to the power gamma. So for all epsilon, I have my epsilon covering, and the sum of the terms to the power gamma is bounded by something which is independent of epsilon and finite. So letting epsilon go to the limit, I have a gamma dimensional Hausdorff measure which is bounded, which proves that the dimension of the leaves is smaller than gamma. Okay, so the proof for the case where the sum is infinite, so it's just me, this is this result there. So we assume that now IA is bounded by A to the power minus alpha for some alpha between 0 and 1. So in this case, it's a little bit more involved, and we will need the result we got on the height of the typical vertex. So the main steps. So first, we have this assumption on AN, and an analytic property is that the rest of the series here has the same kind of upper bound. Then we will do as before, we will decompose our treaty between a treaty N and the rest of the tree, but we will decompose it in a slightly different manner. So here I say that, so this is Tn, and I view T as Tn plus, in Tn, I will look at the set of edge of Tn, which are the segments we obtain when we remove the branch point there. So we have two n minus 1 edges, and I'm interested for each edge in the descendant in T of this edge, which is not a tree but a forest, because we have a group of trees inside in each forest. Okay. And now I will consider that kind of covering. Each part will be an element of the covering. So that's what I call the forest FE. And using a Borel-Cantelli type argument again, we can check that each of these edges here has the same upper bound as we got initially on the sequence A. Okay, so none of them are too big. And second, using that kind of things, we can also check that the height of a typical vertex in the forest is also of the same order. Okay, and we can control the deviation of such a result. So then we arrive to the main result there, which is that each of these forests actually has a diameter which is also bounded by the same quantity, the initial assumption we have there. And to go from this step to this step, we have to throw a lot of typical vertices in our forest. A lot means enough to reach, to be not too far from the extremity, but of course we don't have to send too much of them so that we can still control the deviation. Well, at the end we arrive to this, which means that we have covered our trees with 2n minus 1 part, each of them being of size smaller than n to the power minus alpha plus something negligible. So when we calculate, so this is enough to prove compactness, and when we calculate the sum of the diameter to some power r, well, it's smaller than n to the power 1 minus alpha r plus something, and so clearly this will converge to 0 when alpha is strictly larger than 1, which means that the Hausdorff dimension of the tree is smaller for each of these r, so it's smaller than 1 over alpha. That's the idea. And okay, so this concludes the part for compactness and upper bound. To finish my talk, I will also say a word on the lower bound. So as you know, it's usually more involved than to prove the upper bound. So I just remind the two results in this case. So here I put something more precise than before. I first assume that this series is finite. Okay, so this means that a typical vertex is convergent, and also I assume that the partial sum II is larger than that kind of quantity for some alpha between 0 and 1. And then I have a lower bound 1 over alpha for the Hausdorff dimension. Okay, so let's just say that this is not very restrictive, as it's easy to see, for example, that it is checked as soon as we have a measuration by decreasing power power sequence. Okay, and the second statement, when the total sum of the II is finite, which is written there. Okay. So to prove the lower bound, we'll use Frostman theory. I try to recall quickly what we will use there. And so starting with the proof of the first result there, the reason why I suppose this, it's because I will take the measure of the limiting measure of the typical point as a tool to use the Frostman theory. So I take this measure mu infinity there, which is the limit of the mu n, and then we know from a result by Frostman that if the integral, the double integral on t times t of the measure, this integral is finite for some gamma, then the Hausdorff dimension is larger than gamma. Okay, so I want to prove that kind of stuff under this assumption. So let's take, I have my t, and given this tree, I take two vertices independently at random according to the measure mu infinity. Okay, that's the quantity I called it, so the distance between two typical vertex. And if I take the expectation of this distance to the power minus gamma, I got the expectation of this quantity. So if I prove that the first expectation is finite, this will be finite almost surely, and I will have almost surely my Hausdorff dimension. Okay, so my goal is to prove that this quantity there is finite for all gamma smaller than 1 over alpha, which will give me my lower bound. So of course I won't give the details, but just to show that our lot of calculation, we computed explicitly the law of this two-point function. Here it's explicit in terms of the sequence A. Okay, and given this, then we were able to show that the typical distance d have that kind of behavior for r small, and this gives us the expected upper bound for the expectation of d to the power minus gamma. Last slide, I will say a word on the proof for the other case, which was really the more technical part of our work. Okay, now the total sum of the AI is finite, and in this case, as we saw, the typical, the distribution mu infinity is supported by the skeleton of the tree and not by the leaves. And I want to have a Hausdorff dimension of the set of minoration for the set of leaves. So this won't help me. The only thing that it will give is 1 as a lower dimension for the whole tree. Okay, so I have to find another measure which is supported by a set of leaves to apply Frostman theory. And I try to give an idea of how to construct this measure in the particular case, just to simplify a little bit, where the sequence is exactly a power function. Okay, so if I put the uniform measure on the tree Tn, I have something that won't be supported by the leaves at the limit. So I have to select subtrees of Tn and to put measure on it I will explain what I do. Okay, so first I will build these are sub-parts of my whole tree T. So the first part is just the branch 1, what I call T1. Okay, and I will take for the moment it's an arbitrary sequence of integer nk such that nk plus 1 is larger than 2nk. Okay, so I have built beta 1. I continue my process until I have an index I between n2 and 2, where 2 is the second term of the sequence there. And then I look at the branch indexed by this term that will be attached on beta 1. So it's possible that there is a 0 branch, but let's say there is some of them. Then I continue the process, etc. When I have an index I between n3 and 2 and 3, I will consider only the branch that are branched. So, excuse me, I didn't say, this is the branch that I kept on the second step will form the set beta 2. Okay? So this stuff is beta 2. And now, at the third step, I only look at the branch that are branched on beta 2. The other one are not important. And these will form my set beta 3, etc. Okay. So at the end, I take the union of the beta k and the completion, and this gives me a subtree of my whole tree T that I call T star. And well, the goal is to put some measure on the list of T stars that will be sufficient for our purpose. And for this, we consider for each k the normalized length measure on beta k, supposing that this set is not empty. Okay. So if for each k beta k is not empty, these measures are well defined, and since my tree is compact, there will be at least one converging subsequence, and that's my candidate that I will use for Frostman theory. Okay, so the rest of the proof, I won't detail it at all. Just say that if we take the sequence AK that goes sufficiently fast to infinity, we can check that almost surely the beta k won't be empty. So we really construct a measure like this, and very roughly, we can check that this measure will check what we need to get a lower bound for the other dimension. And that's the end of my talk. Thank you.
Have you considered models where the position of attachment depends on the tree that you've got already? So somehow there's more tendency maybe to attach the places with the big height. So rather than picking the attachment uniformly.
Not really, but so there are some variations, as I said in the beginning. For example, Christina, we presented such a construction of the stable tree where you need to put some weight on the node, on the branch point of the tree. And but no, we have not looked at more general weight. So you want to have more weight on places where you already have a lot of okay, like
so it's like the tips are
reinforcement.
Yeah.
No, we haven't looked at.
The Brownian CRT is invariant in terms of rerouting.
Yeah.
So is there any other situation, either with a deterministic or a random sequence of AIs?
Okay,
Where
so
do you get this?
I don't know, but you're right. The Brownian CRT has nice symmetry property in different way. Another open question is to know which of these three would have a kind of self-similarity property. But for the invariance under rerouting, I don't know. Here the root is not so natural for me. For really a practical tool just to talk about height. That was you don't really need it for the proof. But okay, well, I can't answer your question.
So you have this result that compactness and boundedness are equivalent. Is there anything interestingly different about local compactness?
But local compactness, I mean,
in the unbounded case, are your trees
I think
automatically? I mean, in
wouldn't
this
say
in the
yes,
case where they're all one, it isn't even locally compact. But I'm wondering
I think it's locally compact.
when all the lengths are one, it will have infinite degree close to the root. So
When the lengths are all equal to 1, you can couple this construction with a random recursive tree. with a uniform length on the edges. Yes. So yes, it doesn't look. Yes, you're right. Okay. So well, in general, I don't know. Maybe. So you're right. In this case, it's not locally compact. In general, I don't know.
No other question? Let us thank Lily Glick and